Hello everyone, it's 5:02 and I think we'll kick off if that's okay. I'm Ian Wood, Clinical Director for EMIS Health and a GP down in Berkshire. A very warm welcome to you all and thank you very much for joining us for this EMIS Live event exploring the world of digital therapeutics. Before we get lost in this wonderfully fascinating domain, a little bit of housekeeping from me if that's okay. Just a reminder, the session is being recorded as you can see there on the screen, so for those who are registered but aren't able to join us now, they can catch up on it later. You'll also all be sent a link by email to the recording along with material from the session over the next few days. This afternoon's session will be a panel event and we'll be taking questions via the Q&A functionality in Teams throughout the presentation. We'll be both publishing questions today for the discussion, but also responding to them via the FAQ document that gets sent out after the event. The panelists have also kindly agreed to distribute their contact details as well if there are any individual lines of inquiry to each of them in person. And when you do post a question, please include your name and organisation in case we need to get back to you after the event. In one moment, I'll hand the screen over to Adam, Charlotte, Jessica and Wayne to introduce themselves, as it's always best coming from them rather than myself. But I wanted to thank them in advance for their time today. We've got a panel including key members from the leading organisations in digital therapeutics around the world. And we're looking at the role diversity of our attendees today. I know the content that we're looking to cover will be very interesting to you all. We're going to start with an overview of what digital therapeutics are, and perhaps more importantly what they are not, alongside a view of what the landscape currently looks like. We'll then try and tackle some of the pillars of digital therapeutics in evidence and efficacy, economics, commissioning. We'll look towards a direction for the NHS app library. And just before the Q&A, we'll then take a step back and look at the wider world and the more established markets, and then debate what the future might and should hold here. Now over to some introductions to the panel. We've got Adam, Charlotte, Jessica and Wayne, and I'll hand over to each of them in turn to introduce themselves. Jessica, you're up first. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Ian. My name is Jessica Scholl. I am the European lead for the Digital Therapeutics Alliance, based outside Barcelona, and I come from 18+ years in digital health with WHO, and previous to that doing virtual surgery devices in Washington, DC.
Thank you, Jessica. Welcome. Adam, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Adam Marsh. I work for a company called IQV that you might have come across before. I look after a product we've got called AppScript, which in the UK we've partnered with EMIS to create the EMIS app library. My background's largely things like real world evidence and market access.
Thank you, Adam. Over to you, Charlotte.
Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte D, and I'm the UK Director for Big Health, where our mission is to help millions back to good mental health. I'm a doctor by background, and I think I know some of you in the audience. You know, I love solving problems and I love building ventures within healthcare that ultimately, you know, fundamentally improve and change the way that we deliver care. So that's why I joined Big Health.
Thank you, Charlotte. Welcome. And Wayne.
Hi, I'm Wayne Shirt. I work for NHS Digital. I'm the Senior Project Manager on the NHS Apps Library programme. I've been on the programme for 3 years since its conception, and I'm responsible for all the day-to-day operational running of the programme, along with trying to keep strategy in line with policy, etc.
Thank you, Wayne, and welcome to you as well. So I'll hand over now to Adam and Jessica to get us started. Please do send your questions in during the presentation and also in the Q&A part. When it's appropriate, we'll interrupt for some questions, but let's kick off. Over to you, Adam.
No problem. Actually, I think Jessica might be best placed to take the first slide. So shall I give you an opportunity, Jessica?
Sure, thank you, Adam. So I think we have quite a few clinicians in the audience, and one thing we like to do first and foremost is to distinguish what a digital therapeutic is, because there are hundreds of thousands of things out there in the digital health space, and we need to be able to classify and categorize what is what. So according to the Digital Therapeutics Alliance, and you can see here as well on the EMIS slide, that digital therapeutics are a software intervention. So if this is a software medical device, CE marked, which delivers an intervention to a patient, preventing, managing, or treating a risk factor, in this case, for a medical condition or disease. Regulatory approval is always required. This is in any country. And in the EU, these are CE marked medical devices, so clinical evidence is necessary. the third check mark here, rigorous clinical evaluation, the gold standard is to have at least one randomized clinical trial. Many products, many DTX products have 12 or 20. So another aspect to the clinical evidence part is real world evidence. So once these products are on the market, there is additional evidence gathered, because software, being that it's oftentimes a patient-facing solution in a patient's mobile phone, there's a daily interaction and gathering of data on how a patient is interacting. So I think that answers, well, okay, then to add to Ian's point, what a digital therapeutic is not, we are not talking about simple monitoring devices. We're not talking about a weight loss reminder or a dietary tool. These are software devices which have been put through rigorous clinical trials, and so actually affect a recognized clinical endpoint of a diagnosed disease. So there are only perhaps, in our definition, 200 or so products which meet these requirements. So there are not that many actually to have to sift through. So when looking at products that can be given to patients for a diagnosed condition, digital therapeutics are the place to look. I think we can go to the next slide then, and I'll pass the microphone to Adam at this point.
No problem. So just playing on that kind of final point, if you're thinking of using a digital therapeutic to treat a patient, and it's along the same sort of lines as a medical intervention in terms of a drug or a device, obviously we expect a similar level of evidence to Jessica's point. An often a large misconception about digital health and digital therapeutics in particular is that there isn't all that much evidence around supporting them, and this fortunately isn't the case anymore. Unfortunately, this study is a little bit out of date, but some work IQVIA did back in 2017 was looking at the number of studies and number of digital therapeutics that actually have evidence supporting them, and we can see there's actually a fair number. As Jessica mentioned, that we've had over 600 studies back in 2017 had been published around this topic, and that kind of exponential growth has continued. IQVIA is actually rerunning this analysis later this year, so there will be another report coming out later which will hopefully revise this, and even the numbers will go up even higher. And I think to play off both Jessica and Ian's point earlier around where exactly digital therapeutics sit within this broader digital health picture, if you view digital health as a landscape of everywhere we deploy technology to support healthcare, and then digital medicine sitting within that once you're getting into the kind of classical realm of remote patient monitoring, diagnostics, identifying biomarkers and supporting clinical outcomes. The digital therapeutics is the very top of that pyramid around how you treat the disease with kind of software, either alone or within alongside kind of more conventional treatments. Is there anything on that you'd like to add, Jessica?
No, I think you covered it quite well. I think this is where we like to illustrate the sort of classification of digital health products, because in digital therapeutics, you are treating a disease, whereas in digital medicine, it is monitoring. It's not to say that it's not of value and not effective, it's just a different intended use.
Absolutely.
I think that's really helpful in helping us frame as an audience certainly what digital therapeutics are and where they are currently in their evidence base and the maturity in the market. I think what's great now is we're going to be able to hear from Charlotte and a journey that what Big Health has gone through, and also with Wayne about what kind of standard setting and regulations are in place for the digital products we have currently in the NHS. So I think over to you next, Charlotte, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess, I'm going to talk at length about what I have experienced within Big Health over the last year that I've been here, but appreciate that Big Health has actually been here as a company with Sleepio as a product for the last 10 years, which is a shockingly long amount of time, really, when you think about it, as a digital health company and product. So first of all, I kind of want to go back to what Jessica and Adam were saying. So the importance really for us as a digital therapeutics company is to really demonstrate that we have evidence that our products work, not just clinically, but also in the real world. And there is also emerging evidence that, or perhaps need within the system, that we need to have economic evidence to show that we are either cost saving or cost avoiding, or at least cost effective in the real world. So really the focus of my role really within Big Health is to think about that earlier stage in the development of Sleepio's sort of external research. So we've got 12 randomized controlled trials, I believe. So I'm not really dealing with that side. I'm really thinking about, working with large areas, for example, with Oxford HSN and our project in the Thames Valley, where Ian actually has been really kind of seminal and influential in. We've been looking at, what is the most scalable distribution model for a digital therapeutic? If you think about it, it's a wholly different way of delivering care. Typically, digital therapeutics that tend to be, within the market are based on cognitive behavioral therapy. And the majority of this is delivered face-to-face in the current day. So when we're talking about digital therapeutic that uses CBT, we're really talking about a workforce solution. So if you take the example of Sleepio, the problem that we're really trying to solve here is that treatment gap within insomnia. Many of you know within primary care that we cannot treat insomnia with NICE recommended first-line treatment. Unfortunately, NICE clinical guidelines are not commissioning guidelines. So despite the fact that CBT for insomnia is recommended, that doesn't necessarily mean that commissioners have to then commission and make sure that that is delivered in the place. So the next step really is to really hone into, okay, well, if this is the problem, and this is how we can deliver, or this is the product that we want to be delivering, how do we best get it out to the people? So we've been really working quite hard within the Thames Valley just to think about, is the self-referral route something that we should be focusing on? What about the GP referral route? And certainly we found, a lot of great results initially where you tend to find much higher volumes of patients that have a clinical problem that will then move into therapy and, engage with the self-care element of the digital therapeutic. But we're also integrated into IAP services. And, herein lies the issue of where the NHS at the moment is extremely siloed. And when you want to be integrating something like a digital therapeutic, you want it everywhere, so that wherever an issue arises or where need arises, you want that digital therapeutic to be made available. But the practicalities of making that happen, the fact that there are no shared budgets, the fact that primary care and mental health is still very much seen as these two separate organizations or sectors, makes it very hard for a company to, really show and demonstrate impact across that full patient journey. But we have been able to. So just to give you an example of some of the results that we've seen so far, and I really want to hone in on, that real world evidence of is something being taken up, what are the outcomes, and also what's the emergent kind of economic evidence that we're seeing. Within the Thames Valley really quickly, we've seen over 16,000 people in the last year and a half engage with Sleepio. 7,000 of those have actually moved into the therapy portion. On average, we have 56% remission rates, which is fantastic. For example, IAPT recovery rates, their target is about 50%, and this is completely done through self-care. We've also seen, lots of great patient-reported outcome measures on, reductions in stress, the amount of medications that they've used, that, their workplace well-being is actually improving. And finally, and most probably interestingly of all, I'm not going to go into the full health economics side of it because even I'm not an expert, but we did a time interrupted series over 117 weeks looking at the impact of Sleepio on primary care costs. So looking at GP appointments, looking at medications, we found that there was a significant reduction after the introduction of Sleepio to the tune of about £106 saved per patient that actually used Sleepio. So we're kind of coming to the place where, as a business, as a digital therapeutics leader, hopefully, within the market, we are building those building blocks and putting developing that research so that it hopefully carves out a path for other digital therapeutics companies so that they know what the evidence they need to create, and also helps to really engage with commissioners on a strategic level and say, hey, we've got a lot of evidence. How do we get this embedded in the system? So I'm sure lots of questions, but maybe we can take them afterwards. Wayne, over to you.
Thanks, Charlotte. I just want to explain how we as an organisation have been looking at digital therapeutics, the wider app arena, and what we've been doing over the last 3 years to try to get a national standard out there. I think first thing to understand when we're discussing digital therapeutics and apps, digital tools, is the mindset that the majority of healthcare professionals consider them to be. When we're discussing apps and tools, etc., they are constantly changing. So it's not like EMIS's system, the primary care system that is delivered for GPs to use, where you may get a new version or a tweak to a version once a quarter or once every 6 months. These digital therapeutics are dropping once every 2 weeks in some cases. So we've got to try and keep pace with the change that developers are putting through. But the majority are based on user-centric design and feedback from the users, bug fixes, etc., UI improvements. And then we've got to balance that with not stifling innovation. So we've looked at creating a standard that has been a cross-body standard between Department of Health, NHS England, NHS Digital, CQC, MHRA, NICE, etc., and later NHSX when they came onto the market as well, to ensure that we've got rigorous and robust standards in place that developers, or the majority of developers, can aspire to achieve. Now that is a voluntary standard at the moment, and that standard's been around since sort of February 2017. We're now on version 2.3, and prior to COVID coming along, we were dropping in a new version once a quarter ish, and it's all based on user feedback, developers, commissioners, etc. Just to link in with what Charlotte's saying there, Sleepio was one of the first digital therapeutics that actually successfully got through the question set published on the NHS Apps Library, after having a lot of the evidence reviewed, to the clinical trials, etc., the cost savings and everything else. For any of you who look at the library, the majority of the current digital tools are not digital therapeutics, and that is down to the fact that a lot of the developers are still trying to put together evidence to substantiate their claims, be that financial, clinical, etc. And if you compare this to like the drugs market, some of these drugs have been around for 50, 60, 70, even 100 years in some cases. So there's a tried and tested path that shows what the adverse effects are, etc. What the results are, and very, very, very extreme cases does that deviate from the tried and tested. Where digital therapeutics, it's a new world, and it's a strange new world. It's constantly changing, and people's understandings and expectations differ from depending where you're coming from. As a GP or a clinician, looking at it from one side, as a techie, looking at it from a different side. So it's been a difficult balancing act to ensure that when we put something out there that's past the question set and it's published on the library, that it is trusted. I mean, this programme's fundamental reason for being is to deliver trusted apps and digital tools that can be used by the public in a central place. And if that trust is eroded, we might as well close shop. And that's what we've been really, really keen to work with developers over the last 3 years, well, nearly 4 years now actually, and get a robust process in place that's easy for developers to follow, for the developers to understand. in the documentation and the emails that you'll be sent after the call today, there's links there to our published guidance pages. So the guidance pages detail every single thing that we do, the questions we ask, the acceptance criteria, independent support and guidance. So for example, on the data protection section, there's links to the ICO website, specific pages or extracts. There's templates on there. It's really worth having a read. It talks you through the journey from a member of the public, from a clinician, etc., and what we currently do on the day-to-day operational side of things. I think that's it from my point of view at the moment, unless we've got questions coming in.
Thank you, Wayne. Yeah, and well, there's immediately some discussion points to come out of what we all raised here, and I should probably get my DOI in places that I also do work for Charlotte at Big Health, so that I'll try and stay impartial here. But Charlotte, I want to direct a question to you if I can, because people I'm sure will be interested to hear about barriers to uptake and adoption. And I mean, CPO and Big Health have got evidence. You've got RCTs, you've got real world evidence. You also directly and indirectly impact on healthcare by reducing prescribing and other parameters as well, especially in mental health. And you've got cost savings as well. So for a commissioner, you'd think, well, this is a golden egg. What are the barriers to people adopting these solutions and uptaking them? I'd be really keen to see what you've experienced.
Yeah, very good question. And I think, can I be frank on this call? I can be frank. So I think truly strategic commissioning at the typical CCG level does not exist. So we're talking about, think about your audience with your commissioners. You've got people who perhaps have been working within commissioning for the last 20 years. To commission something like a digital therapeutic requires you to think about, well, do I need to decommission a current service to get you on board? So where's my budget to be able to, take on board, for example, Sleepio? Then you've also got to think about the different directorates within your commissioning body and how Sleepio can impact on that. So, for example, if you had a digital therapeutic that improved, perhaps primary care costs, it reduced medications costs. It also helped to reduce maybe A&E attendances, and perhaps there are a few other things that related to self-care and mental health. You've got to engage with all of these different directorates and ensure that all of these, your clinical stakeholders and your lead clinicians and commissioners are aligned with, this is the value proposition, this is why we think this is a really good idea. And then there's the political play, so making it really clear to whoever the chief exec or the chair is within your commissioning body that this is something that is absolutely needed in the system. Not many companies out there will put in that effort. You can imagine it is a 4-person team that is specifically focusing on perhaps one commissioning region, and the output of that is, yes, you improve patient care, but to be honest, you're going to be hamstrung by the budget that's set for something like a digital therapeutic. Moreover, some digital therapeutics are, replacing current services that do not exist. And the truth of the matter is that there is lots of things out there that will improve patient care, but will not be commissioned at scale. I think one of the commissioners told me, if we could just commission a GP to be like situated in every person's home, we would, you would expect patient outcomes to be improved, you'd have a personalized GP that would go around with you, but we're not going to do that because it's just so expensive. And also that's just not the way that commissioning works. You have a budget that gets given to you per year and you've got to stick to it. And most of the time, as we all know in the system, we are over budget. A lot of commissioning bodies are in recovery plans, so it's not like you have additional spend to play around with to do innovative things. So apologies if there are other people out there who are running digital health companies or wanting to move into digital therapeutics. It's really exciting, really innovative. It's probably one of the most exciting fields, I think, out there within the healthcare space, but it is, there is a massive chasm between the excitement of developing the product and making it work within, the clinician and patient population, and actually just getting it scaled and embedded within the NHS. So that's just kind of like the embedding side. And then, you know, I can talk at length around the confusion that our users and our buyers and our distributors may have around, well, you know, do we even need digital therapeutics when you can just prescribe, you know, something that I can find on the App Store? Like, it seems to work fine. I seem to work fine with it. I don't understand why I need to pay for, you know, yes, it's great that you've got evidence, but where is the benefit for me, and where is the benefit for my patient, you know, over and above what I currently see in the status quo? So I think there is a question mark around how we differentiate different digital therapeutics from the rest of the apps that you can find on the App Store. And I think, you know, the work that Wayne's doing is fantastic. Like, the NHS Apps Library is exactly where we want to be going. You know, I know that Wayne's probably going to be able to talk about how it's going to evolve and how it's going to involve users and clinicians in making sure that that does evolve and, you know, is really fit for purpose for, you know, the future of NHS 2.0. So I'll kind of let Wayne kind of talk to that point. So yeah.
Wayne, that sounds like an invitation in. And actually, I was going to ask you about that. You mentioned about these trusted apps, if you like, or products. And you know, are you looking at ways of sort of badging and labelling the things that are on the app library to give clinicians or any users, patients or clinicians, better confidence, and how are you looking at doing that?
Yeah. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Charlotte. So at the moment, the library has various categories assigned to the apps, and that's based on user feedback, user research from members of the public. Not much clinician feedback or healthcare professional, because we've been focusing predominantly on members of the public to start with. However, what we've been doing, again, just prior to COVID, and it's on our roadmap for this current 6-month time slot, is to look at introducing more badges to each app to identify, as Charlotte said, the difference between a digital therapeutic and a wellbeing app. Might both be on, you know, sleep, but what's the difference? So members of the public and healthcare professionals can see that at a glance. Now, we've not started in anger really looking at that in detail, where what we include on the badging and what's not included on the badging. But we want to make sure that we make apps that have got, you know, sufficient evidence or more than sufficient evidence stand out compared to the ones who are just here to promote, well-being or self-management. You know, if you think of the app library and the journey of a developer, it's like transport. A pair of trainers are transport, and a space rocket is transport, but you would never review and audit both forms of transport in the same way. And apps and digital therapeutics are exactly the same. You've got really complex interoperable apps that are connecting to national systems, and in the same space and the same environment, you've got a simple app that plays music for 2 minutes so a child knows how long to brush their teeth. And it's trying to understand what level of trust that we have got within the developer and what their product does. And, you know, God forbid, nobody wants to see the, you know, selling data to Cambridge Analytical situation that was, you know, in the press a few years back, and things like that. So it's key that we can make it as simple as possible for people to use and to see, and to give them sufficient detail should they want to do, and to drill down into the apps. So as I said earlier, with the guidance pages, we'll show you all the questions we ask, all the acceptance criteria, all the guidance and support. What we are planning to do over the last 2 quarters of the current financial year is to look to publish the actual results of the assessment done against developers and the products. We get several FOI requests per week asking for, you know, why is this app on the library, or why is that app not on the library? You know, we don't pick and choose what apps come to us. It's an open door. Anybody in the world who's a developer of an app can, you know, click on that apply button, and it will take them through an automated process to see if they're eligible. And eligibility at the moment and has been tied into what was the 5-year forward view and now the long-term plan. And again, taking aspects of the plan will form the badging. I mean, we're looking at round about 30, 35-ish badges. I mean, don't worry about wouldn't be 35 on one app, but just to cover various aspects of what we've got out there and to make it simple. But what we will do is conduct user research, because this programme, as far as I'm concerned, and since I joined, everything's been done based on user research and user feedback. To the extent I've had arguments internally with my own team because I thought something looks good or doesn't look good, and I'm told no, user research says this. Right, okay, let's go with user research. So that's what we intend to do, set up a small panel, and Charlotte's volunteered Big Health to be one of the trial developers to see how this badging will work and how we can evolve it to make it simple for healthcare professionals and members of the public at the same time.
That's hugely reassuring to hear, Wayne. And actually, that ties me into my next question. Just one for you, Jessica. That's okay. About how does this compare? How do we compare as a UK landscape to the international leaders in digital therapeutics, if you like? What is adoption? What is uptake like in these more established markets? Looking at some areas in Europe and over in the States.
So I think the UK actually was sort of a spearheader in the field because back in 2015, EMIS Health was already present in the NHS, but there are now programs nationally in Germany, Digital Therapeutics, as well as other kinds of digital health products they call DIGA, can be reimbursed for the 73 or 80 million Germans in their national healthcare plan. Also, Belgium now has a framework for digital health products, including digital therapeutics. France, the Netherlands, evidently, is another ripe country for this. Sweden and Finland. So it's becoming in Europe something that is quite understood. And I think in the US, it's a very different kind of healthcare system. I think it was consumer driven for the most part initially. And now with actually the pandemic, it's becoming something that the Medicare, Medicaid services are looking at as well. So this is a global recognition, I think now, not just in the UK.
Which it ties in really well with Charlotte's point earlier about the challenges that sort of local commissioning face. When actually places like Germany, you've got a national funding pool, potentially some national kind of commissioning. Are they seeing good uptake? Are digital therapeutics working there? Are they getting the scale which we're wanting to see here in the UK? And what barriers are they hitting? And what can we learn from them to try and make it better in the UK? In
Germany, well, this is all very new. So the law allowing for prescription in Germany was only passed in 2019. In this period from January to June, they've been implementing the process. And so now the HTA, the Health Technology Organization, which is called BfArM in Germany, the German word I won't say, they are now accepting products into their system. They will be evaluated over these next 3 months. So any product that applies, they are guaranteed an evaluation before 3 months is up. So at the end of this year, we'll start to see the first products come through. At which point it will remain to be seen how often and where products become prescribed, because it's then up to the clinicians, because patients may or may not know about it, clinicians may or may not know about these products. And so even though there's a whole system in place, these products have to be recognized for their value and fit into the healthcare continuum of care that a physician goes through every day. I think this is a critical point, is that we're very conscious that physicians have no time, that they can't be learning how to use a whole new platform, that it has to fit with what they're already doing. And I would also kind of add to this one of the questions that was posted about, are you able to reach sort of minority populations and the poorest in our society? And I think that digital health and digital therapeutics in particular are geared for anyone who has a smartphone or a tablet. And this is becoming more and more ubiquitous. So in the UK, I've read there are 76% of cell phone users are smartphone users. That's pretty high. That's covering a huge chunk of people. Even in Spain, it's 80%. So, and this is a country that has that your average monthly income could be 600 euros. So this is a way to reach people who would otherwise maybe not be overlooked, but wouldn't have the daily access that digital therapeutic can give someone.
I think that's a really good point, and it's a very good question that's come from the Q&A. And I think there's a wider piece there about sort of digital transformation of primary care and widening these inequalities. And I think it's a very fair challenge that it brings inequalities and widens those gaps. But I think the first step to tackling that first is going into these inequalities eyes open, which I think we very much are now. People recognise that there is a digital inequality here arising in health around COVID. But it's also, I think it's always worth remembering that our traditional ways of working and the transactional way of making a patient book an appointment, wait 3 weeks, come and see their GP, wait in a waiting room for an hour because they're overrunning, come in many ways justify the prescription of antibiotics and then leave. That in itself produces so many steps for inequalities as well, but it's just inequalities in different groups. And this digital transformation has just created a different pocket which won't be able to access care in the same way. For me, we have to just make sure with this digital process that the doors remain open. That's not just doors to GP, the primary care, but doors to accessing any treatment just need to remain open. And that the digital transformation is about providing sort of additional ways to access that care that then free up a lot of capacity in other means for those whom the digital isn't the right medium. A lot of those services are extremely overrun and understaffed, and actually that's why waiting times are 9 months a year. You use Charlotte's example for CBT for insomnia. Some places it's over a year waiting list to access CBT for insomnia. Actually, what this offers is taking away a big proportion of that population to be treated with a digital product and treated effectively with the evidence which Charlotte has spoken about already, leaving that other group for whom digital isn't right. They can then have that traditional or that other way of seeking access, which is no longer got that year waiting list. So I actually see digital as an enabler, and we've just got to make sure that we don't close off other avenues just because we've opened up this great digital one.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I feel like this is a massive issue within digital therapeutics companies, not just digital therapeutics, digital health in general. I completely agree with the assertion that at the moment a lot of digital apps are geared towards your middle class or people who have income and revenue and resources to spend on data, and that we're missing a huge swath of the population that actually have increased needs, and the impact on them could be even better, be even more stark if we could treat them properly. I feel like there are two things. So you can do things with the product that could make that could tackle the inequality issue. So, for example, I was speaking to a GP in Scotland, and they were saying that sometimes they can't prescribe a mobile app to someone because that person doesn't have the data package that they can't pay for that ongoing contract to be able to download the app, then use it on an ongoing basis, because the app itself uses so much data, and it means that they can't then do all of the other things that they needed to be doing with their phone. And there's various other issues about the fact that CPO, for example, at the moment is majority a web-based platform. Not everybody has a laptop, so we're working really hard internally to generalize our platform and turn CPO into a fully functioning app that hopefully can just be downloaded in one. So perhaps you're in your GP practice, you're using the GP's Wi-Fi to download the app, and then you can use it at home without needing to spend any more on it. And then there's also other things that we can't do. So for example, those that just aren't digitally literate, and so we'll need to partner with charities and various other organisations who are best placed to reach those people, and to be really culturally sensitive and to work out how best we can modify the product and be creative and use other ways of delivering treatment to them, but in a scalable way. But as Ian says, I think there are lots of opportunities. For example, do we know currently what our penetration is like across the population? Do we know whether the way that we currently deliver care, whether that widens inequality? And I think the potential for using digital health is that it helps to raise some of these issues, and it gives you data to be able to quantify those issues. So.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. And Jessica, I've got a few questions which from what you just said there about, if these really to succeed, they need to be a single step, or ideally no further steps away from a clinician's workflow, because ultimately many of these will require clinicians to endorse. These are treatments, these are therapies, and we're delivering what's best for patients here. And we've got to look at ways in which providers like EMIS and others can surface these tools and the safety of them, and when not to prescribe them, and how to encourage that interaction with the patient too. Adam, I wondered if you wanted to a brief mention about the EMIS app library and how that works.
Absolutely. I think distribution is one of the key questions we as an industry need to address. That we're kind of well set up as a healthcare system globally to hand a drug over to a patient or to bring you into a clinic to give you an injection or an infusion. That method of handing an app or a website code with suitable login details to a patient is a very difficult process. Solutions like the EMIS app library and the way we've kind of integrated with an electronic health record is part of the solution, but it's not the whole of it. We like to think of it as one of many channels that should be utilised and can be utilised by physicians to get these kinds of products into the hands of their patients. So yeah, I think that's very important. The other side of it is not pigeonholing where this sits in the pathway. So the EMIS app library and AppScript more generally is very much in the UK a primary care focused solution. To Charlotte's point, iApp services have a very natural home for products like Sleepio as well. And there are many, particularly when we look at some of the products that are currently available in the States, that are likely to have to be specialist prescribed by the time they come over to the UK. With that in mind, that means we're going to need solutions that work with hospital systems as well. So it's a very big topic of which we are starting to scratch the surface with the solutions we can provide, but there's lots of work still to be done.
Thank you very much, Adam. So we've got some questions that come through in the Q&A, which it's a timely time, I think, to jump to those. I think, Charlotte, this top one looks like it's a good one for you about uptake, fallout, relationship between who carries on digital therapeutics. Do we find that patients actually do stick with them? Either Charlotte or Jessica, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I can take this one from my experiences so far, kind of implementing Sleepio. I feel that I love that third don't take the drug, third don't take the drug as prescribed, and the third do. But I think that is presuming that you have the same denominator. So you're not also looking at the proportions of those who are taking the drug or not, or being in compliant. If you were, let's say, just giving it to them over the counter, like you would never look at that. And so you've got this, I guess, curious situation with a digital therapeutic and just the number of different distribution channels and trying to work out what uptake and fallout is. I think so. Based on, I was just looking at some of the data, and based off what I've seen so far, what we tend to find is that the worse your sleep is, and whether and also whether you've seen a GP or let's say an iApp service or even a social prescriber, and actually we've got emerging evidence that family and friends referrals is also quite effective. Those sorts of people with that sort of motivation and almost the push in the right direction from someone who is trusted, that tends to lead to much improved uptake. So, for example, in our GP distribution channel, I think it was something like 50–60% conversion, as awful as that sounds. So people who were prescribed it and they did the initial sleep score, so they worked out whether they had an actual sleep problem and what their sleep condition indicator was, and then 50–60% of those then moved into the actually starting and engaging with the CBT therapy program. It tends to be much less when you look at a very broad brush, essentially marketing distribution. So, for example, we've done things like Facebook ads in the past where you can specifically look at Facebook ads for a particular postcode region. The uptake for that is very low. So you tend to get a big uptick in terms of people kind of joining and looking at the website and perhaps registering, but very few of those, and it tends to be correlated with, you know, how severe their sleep is at presentation. Very few of those then actually move into the CBT portion. So part of our experiment and our ongoing experiments in the future is, you know, how do we reach those who have a clinical problem, but in a very scalable way? So that's the whole kind of, I guess, question that we want to be answering with our distribution model. So I hope that makes sense and hope it answers some of it.
It absolutely does. Charlotte, you have a single provider's view on that. Jessica, is that what we see across the wider market as well?
Yeah, I mean, Charlotte has a lot of experience with that. And I think too, it depends on the condition and how the DTX is paired. I mean, you have some standalone DTX, so you have some paired with the medication. And actually, I can think of a DTX for asthma and COPD, which is primarily in the US right now, but the medication adherence across the two, let's say, disease states was about 22%, like correctly following protocol. But with the DTX, obviously that there was adherence with the DTX as well, but it jumps to 55%. That's more than double. So it's notable. And because a DTX is usually a daily interaction with the patient, you have, whether it be a platform or a smartphone, there's constant engagement. And this, not only is it, I've used it myself. I used the digital therapeutic myself for lower back pain for months. And it was, you had a coach talking to you every day. It was a digital coach, okay, but you had to react, and it was something that kept me involved with the protocol. And so I think this is something that digital can do, which typical medications cannot. And in addition to that, there's the long-term trends over what the patient has done, why they didn't follow protocol. So you can actually tell what's happening. It's not a matter of guessing or asking the patient after 6 months saying, so what happened here? And they don't even remember anymore, like why they weren't able to adhere. So there are two advantages. Yes, is much better adherence, and there's a much more consistent feedback on why it worked or why it didn't.
Thank you. Yeah, wonderful. We've got some great questions coming in from Paul Riley as well. There's one here about noise from commissioners. So people in NHSX, in DHACA and ORCA are visible, rising and publishing and helping, but commissioners seem somewhat quiet and hidden. We need more noise from commissioners, don't we? I mean, I think everyone here would want to comment on that. Well, actually, someone has started typing. I can't see who that is. It just says moderator. Is that you, Charlotte?
Yeah, it was. Sorry, I didn't realise we were answering this one, but yes, can take this one, I guess. Yeah, you're right, Paul. You know, we have this almost like a top layer of the NHS and, you know, including NHS Digital, who are really forward-thinking, innovative. And I guess, you know, when you're at those echelons, you know, in your lofty towers or within kind of the NHS sort of stratosphere. Wayne,
I hope you're not describing my office.
Because be careful, Wayne's on the call.
Yeah.
Floating
I know I work in
above the clouds.
Yeah.
You know, you have this wonderful top-down view, and you can just see, it's almost like, you know, in Lion King, you know, all your lands that you survey are yours until the dark side. It's like you have that space and that kind of vision to be able to be innovative and to test out with new things. When you're in the commissioner level, you know, it's like being any kind of manager. You've just been given a budget and you need to deliver to it. And a lot of the things are just set, you know, previously, you know, the year before, like if I was a primary care commissioner, I'm not going to be able to like decommission primary care services. Are you joking? That means I'm putting people out of a job. Like that is, you know, everyone talks about the Daily Mail test. That would be absolutely shocking. But sometimes, you know, that's essentially what you're doing when you're trying to introduce a new service. Like 80% of your budgets are going to be tied up in essentially heads, like headcount and services that are being delivered by that headcount. So, you know, I guess in short, you know, what I said, like the current commissioning model just doesn't incentivize those sorts of innovative behaviors. Like you absolutely do have commissioners who really want to be pushing the mold, but they're going to get the, you know, their heads shot off if they, you know, peak above the parapet. Like they need to be delivering cost savings. They need to be within budget. And if you say to them, oh, you know, we're this bright, spangled, sparkly little digital therapeutic that doesn't save you any money in a year, they're going to be like, thank you, goodbye. You're going to go, why don't you do the B2C route? Because I'm sure patients will pay for you, but I'm sorry, commissioners just don't have the budget. Does that make sense? And also, does that answer the question, Paul?
Unfortunately, Paul can't reply, but we can assume that it does. And Paul, we've got another great question though about payment by results here, about apps recording a lot of data, and that can be shared with clinicians and commissioners, can't it? And we've got, I'm sure there's 3 or 4 people called itching to answer it. And this is music to my ears, really. I mean, I love this space. The overprescribing work that some of the groups do out of the RCGP is fantastic work, and campaigns like the Choosing Wisely campaign really putting a focus on outcomes and results for things to be commissioned and to be used. And I think Digital Therapeutics is in a unique position to be able to launch and start off with that in mind, rather than the spaces we've got into with some other treatments, which I won't name any, or any specialties in particular, which have been around for a long time, keep getting recycled, reused, but actually don't have the evidence to back them. I know Adam, you had some things to comment on, and Jessica as well, you put some comments there too, but maybe we could have a little discussion around outcome-based payments. Yeah,
I think I would just re-echo what you've said, that we inherently have the data in this space, so let's use it. It would seem incredibly foolish for, in this case, Charlotte, to have excellent insight to what patients are doing, what benefits they're feeling through using the treatment, what the drop-off rates are, where the incentives are, what's the difference between a GP prescribing it to an IAP service, and then not sharing that with the commissioner that's forking over the cash. I'm sure Charlotte would love to be able to go down and sit with a commissioner and say, this is what you're paying for, here's the results we're giving you. And then hopefully be able to turn around and say, actually, I think you probably are underpaying us. Let's have a discussion about the price, but I wouldn't want to put her in that position. So I think, yeah, we need to lead the charge on this. IQVIA certainly, and part of my job up until very recently has been very much involved in pricing around drugs and understanding how that market dynamic works. And if you go and talk to somebody like Novartis for a CAR T therapy, they would love to be able to say for Kymriah what the outcome was on the day it happened. This has been the benefit, and let's have a conversation with the commissioner around it. So it seems like a no-brainer that we've got to be first through the breach with this.
Can I just come in there?
Yeah, please, Wayne. Please.
Thank you. So, Paul, I fully agree with your question there. Does it make sense to get payment by results? I think the entire area of payment needs looking at from a digital point of view. So we need to, again, differentiate between clinical IT systems and drugs and digital therapeutics and apps. You know, there's a massive market here that, you know, we've got untapped data, and we are seeing it more and more with developers being able to give us that specific data of, you know, when, where, who, how the intervention worked, and, you know, the results of it. And this is key to getting funding at a later date, and it shouldn't be, you know, but also we shouldn't be paying for services as if it was a bricks and mortar service or a, you know, a regular service. You know, it wants a true cross-body commissioning review to look at this in its entirety, in my opinion, and just to you know, not to stifle innovation, but to give companies that incentive to get into the market and why we can get into the market, but also to demonstrate to the commissioning bodies and, you know, the purse holders what they're actually getting for the money. You know, because what you may find is, and you know, my program in particular suffers from this, and it's one of the banes of my life, is we enable benefits, but I don't claim a single benefit because it's not my money that I am saving. It's allowing, you know, GP practices to use online appointments, or you know, where we've got Sleepio on there and other apps are obviously on there. You know, we've put all the hard work into making sure that we're safe and sound and secure, but it's the commissioning bodies, the STPs, the CCGs of this world that are realising those benefits. But are they actually seeing the benefits? And, you know, does it do what it says on the tin, to quote a phrase? And to me, you know, it truly needs this, you know, a cross-party, cross-body review of this entire sector, and some incentives need to be put in place. You know, why should we pay for poor performance just because there's a contract in place? It should be an output-based, you know, a results-based mechanism, whatever that mechanism is. I'm not got a magic wand, and you know, I can't suggest it, you know, off the top of my head, but it definitely needs that. So I think it's a fantastic question, and I think, you know, you've got it from all three sides here, really.
And I would just add one thing, if I could, Ian.
Please, yeah.
Just to say that a lot of DTX companies started in the US, where the healthcare system is very different, very expensive, and oftentimes employers are the ones paying for health insurance for their employees. And that's where a lot of DTX companies were first accepted. And believe me, those companies wanted to see value for the money that they were giving, you know, for these products. And so they were convinced. I mean, this is, you know, 7-8 years ago. And so I think all of those arguments are there. It's just a matter of presenting it in a way that healthcare systems can understand. And maybe it's, you know, by CCG, okay, but this information is available.
Yeah, fantastic. We've had one. There's probably time for a few more questions. One's just came in earlier, Charlotte, which I think is very much pointed at you, saying that CPO costs £400. Do your CCGs pay for that? I know you'll want to clarify there.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to be really clear on this public and recorded Microsoft Teams chat that Sleepio will never be £400 per patient, ever, if I am to continue in this company. No, so Sleepio currently costs £70, and only for a patient that actually gets treated with the CBT for insomnia. So if a patient joins, registers, goes on the community, realizes that they didn't actually need the CBT, that's free for you. So yeah, just want to be super clear that anything above that number that I've just said is wrong. And it's partly, I'm being a bit facetious, but you know, when you're a digital health company and you're sort of just kind of scrappily getting set up, you're constantly testing and experimenting with lots of different pricing models. And to be honest, I think we're just being, you know, we continue to be stung by that to our current day. Like, even I've seen, you know, numbers like £200. That is absolutely not true. So just wanted to make that super clear.
Thank you, I knew you would. One thing that has come up a few times throughout this has been about upskilling clinicians as well, and getting them to understand more about digital therapeutics and when they're appropriate to use. And I'm really pleased to see, actually, we do have now at the RCGP a clinical champion for digital therapeutics, a gentleman post Richard. He had hoped to give us some of the materials that they're working on about sort of education around digital therapeutics to share with you all today. He wasn't able to get it, but I'm hoping that by the time we send out a recording for you, we'll be able to have at least some materials that you can share with your colleagues that you work with and for yourself. I was about to draw to a close. We have had two, so one question come in right here, and this will be our final question, and then we will draw to a close. There's nothing worse than an evening webinar that runs over. So given the fact, this is from Andy, thank you, Andy, given the fact that we're moving towards an ever-aging population along with its accompanying increased funding challenges together with a pressing need to move with curative to preventative care, digital health and digital therapeutics should make sense. But are problems to greater adoption sound insurmountable, listening to what we've been speaking about? Within the UK, should we be hopeful that there is the chance of scaled adoption across the NHS for an effective digital therapeutic?
We have no choice but to be hopeful. We love the NHS and we're here to support it. So, but also we're already there, you know, in terms of scaling an effective digital therapeutic. Sleepio and Daylight, our new product for generalized anxiety disorder, as part of the COVID-19 response, were two of the 4 apps initially to be chosen to support the mental health and well-being of NHS and social care staff. So yes, that's not quite national scale, but certainly national in terms of covering a workforce that is, dearly needed and is currently, is being extremely affected and impacted on by the pandemic. So I think I am hopeful because we've got the likes of Wayne at the top in his, in his lofty tower, making sure that we're going in the right direction. And, I think as Paul says, there are lots of people who are talking about this and are being really vocal. At some point, something's going to click. And I think, reflecting on the pandemic, it really has been a catalyst. As awful as it has been, it's been a catalyst for digital transformation in the NHS. And I think that's only going to catalyse, the adoption of digital therapeutics in the future. I just can't tell you the timeline.
Hear, hear. That's a wonderful sentiment, I think, to finish on. Thank you everyone for joining us, and a big thank you as well to our panel, Adam, Charlotte, Jessica and Wayne. I hope you've enjoyed this evening, whether you're new to digital therapeutics or whether you are a seasoned hand. I hope it's been informative. Please do feed any questions you have either to direct a panelist or through to us, and we'll try to answer where we can, and we'll get those materials out along with the recording in the next few days. A really big thank you to everyone on the panel. I'm not sure how Newsnight do it, but everyone could give a wave and we'll sign off now. But thank you very much.